memorized Polonaise there by the Polish composer Michał Ogiński, written in the late 18th century, subtitled Farewell to the Fatherland, Pożegnanie Ojczyzny, as Poland was physically wiped off the map of Europe for 123 years by the rapacious partitioning powers of Russia, Prussia, and Austria. But anyway, here we are to start a fine afternoon. Brother Kyle, how are you, man?
I'm very well. How are you, brothers?
Join the party over here?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, man, thanks for inviting me over.
No doubt. You want to talk a little bit?
Absolutely.
Let's play some chess.
Welcome to Richtown, where eternal beatitude begins in this life. I'm Kyle Dean, and today I have with me Michael Zachowicz, a proud, patriotic Polish American, an avid musician, a chess master, and an overall great guy. Michael, it's great to have you on today. How are you?
Your words are very kind, Kyle. It's a pleasure to be here, as always, my friend.
Yes, indeed. And friend, emphasis on that. I've known you for years and years and years. So, I guess we'll just get out of the way right now. But and he's also a political aspirant. You've got something coming up soon, but we're not here to talk about that necessarily.
No, I'm just glad to be part of this ministry that our community is very grateful for. Just to reach out and talk to everyday average folks and get to know folks in your community. Sometimes we can be very isolated, especially in this day and age with technology separating us. It's not like the good old days where we know all of our neighbors and so forth. So,
and compound that with what happened in the wake of COVID and everything
certainly.
else.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for your kind words. The Rich Dawn is, just a community effort. That's exactly what it is. I personally am actually an apolitical person. I tend to say that throughout my episodes. That being said, I think that it's very courageous that, you're seeking to make a difference in our community in a very, very objectively speaking, important and necessary way for those that are called to it. And yet you also have the courage, the chutzpah, if you will, to just to come on in the wake of that coming up and be yourself. You know what I mean?
It just started with a group of people talking, especially in Cheektowaga, and we were just maybe tired of the way things were. And said, hey, like the old adage is, whether it's attributed to Sir Edmund Burke correctly or not, when evil prevails when good men do nothing.
Yeah.
The evil may not necessarily be out there right in our face, but we can't sit passively during these trying times. And we just thought, let's do something a little different in our community and get involved in the political process. And we decided who's going to run for which offices and so forth. And because I had some experience working with legislator Raymond Dusha, back 20-some years ago, a fine conservative Democrat from Cheektowaga, had some experience in his office. We decided, well, why don't we give it a shot for the Erie County Legislature in the 7th District, which entails western Cheektowaga, a little bit of parts of Buffalo, such as Lovejoy, Kaisertown, South Buffalo, and even some election districts in West Seneca. And it's just a matter of getting a slate of candidates. I'm speaking of folks running for the Cheektowaga Town Board as well, friends of mine, and trying to make a difference in our community, trying to bring some common sense back to every level of government that's needed, whether it be at the county level, the town level, and especially, of course, we need folks at the state and federal levels.
Beautiful. Well, and I suppose I'm just an everyday citizen that don't believe I'm ever called to that world personally, but I will emphasize that it is part of our patriotic duty to vote, right? And
Certainly.
And it takes, obviously, the people. That's how, we're represented in this process. So it'd be great to learn about Michael the man. Here and now, let's have a talk. One thing that we mentioned in the intro is that you are, at least I would say, from the years that I've had the great displeasure to attempt to battle you on the chessboard, that you're a chess master. I don't know whether you'd self-identify in the context of whoever else is out there, but
I wouldn't, because that's a formal title, and I need to accumulate a few more points necessary and be recognized as such. But
understood.
Chess is such a humbling game because you could have all this confidence playing against folks that might not be as good as you, but then you play against some folks that just totally knock you on your rear end because they just know the moves and just know how to recognize the patterns. So it's a great, wonderful game, especially for children. And I'm fortunate to be working for the Buffalo Chess Association, a plug out there for them, and teaching kids after school, instilling with them some creative thinking skills, some good discipline. Chess requires a lot of discipline, and then acceptance that you're going to probably lose half your games, or give or take a few. And it's just, after a couple of hours of playing chess, it's just like going to the gym. Your body's physically worked out, but with chess you really just feel it, and you feel the synapses clicking and so forth, and then when you can watch games online thanks to the benefit of the internet, of masters over the years, or just read about them as well, whether it be the great masters Capablanca or Alekhine or Bobby Fischer, of course, and the more contemporary ones such as Garry Kasparov, of course, Magnus Carlsen, and it's just amazing when you see the genius in their thought processes. But it's great for not only kids but folks of all ages. It's great mental exercise, and it's such a great international game played all over the world. So I'm a big advocate for the game of chess, especially among children. Studies show that kids who know how to play chess do better on math scores, and we could certainly use that kind of help.
Amen. Amen.
Nice board you have there, by the way.
I appreciate it. Yeah, this one's been with the family for some time now, and well, I haven't been in chess club since middle school, so.
Mm-hmm. Man, you're throwing me off here with this opening. What am I supposed to do with that? I wanted to say...
I'm just going to go right in.
I wanted to say thanks for letting me tinkle the ivories there before it. You know, it wasn't a Grammy Award-winning performance, but he gave me about 24 seconds notice. Hey, can you play something? Should I play the Chopin Ballade No. 1 in G minor as Opus 23 or the Fantasy Impromptu? Well, we decided to do the Oginski Polonaise, at least my rendition, loaded with clunkers and whatever else. But
yes.
All right, let's see here. Continue, Kyle. What other questions might you have?
Did you say the Buffalo Chess Club is what you're part of?
It's called the Buffalo Chess Association.
The Buffalo Chess Association.
Yeah,
so maybe as we're playing here, of course, for our listeners,
mm-hmm.
you know, it's like what did you say earlier? It's like announcing like a baseball game, all the moves and things going on. Maybe the kids can learn something here, huh? So
that was in reference to the long periods of silence in between, especially for our radio audience. Trying to broadcast a chess game to a radio audience. Let's describe what's happening. Okay.
This could be done.
So you moved out your bishop here. You're blocking your queen pawn. That's okay. We'll let you do that. All right.
Oh.
Let's continue.
See, children, don't ever do what I just did.
What's new in your world, Kyle?
Oh, what's new in my world?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the last episode that we just cut for the Rich Dawn was with Father Kreis.
Mm-hmm.
He's a Pauline father and a doctor of biblical theology, so that was a very exciting opportunity for the community to connect in that regard, and I learned a lot. You know,
I've had the pleasure of knowing him over the past couple of years. I work as the organist at St. John Gualbert's in Cheektowaga near the Buffalo border for the past 5 years. But also because of the Road to Renewal, we've had a combination of parishes, especially the ones on the east side of Buffalo. So I now have the pleasure of playing the 10:15 Mass at not Corpus Christi, St. John Canty's. I have played at Corpus Christi before. I'm grateful for Father Matius Dimmick for calling me to fill in here and there, and at St. Stan's as well. Both beautiful churches on Buffalo's east side, all of them.
So this is another way that you give back to the community. You don't just tickle the keys at home.
No, not often enough. You know, like the great Polish pianist Ignacy Jan Paderewski said, if I don't practice for 1 day, I know it. If I don't practice for 2 days, the critics know it. And if I don't practice for 3 days, everybody knows it, right? So we could always be practicing more, but...
Wisdom. Yeah, I mean, that's what's going on in my life right now, Zachowicz. I mean, it's just trying to spread wisdom, I guess, on that vein, you know, and that's what happened definitely in the last episode and all the episodes that we've had the great privilege to cut. You know, I've been involved in young adult ministry for almost a decade now. As you also well know, that's kind of one of my biggest ways of giving back to the community. And we've shown that through this podcasting effort with a bunch of the guests that we've had on recently. So
I wanted to say I enjoyed the episode with Father Kreis. He's a wonderful homilist.
Yes.
His PhD is in what? In
biblical theology, I think specifically with a focus on Old Testament.
Mm-hmm. And that's something, I don't know if you agree with me or not, as Catholics, of course, even though in the 3-year liturgical cycle, of course, there's an Old Testament reading at every weekend Mass, except for the Easter season, maybe some other exceptions. But I find that our Protestant brothers and sisters, particularly the evangelicals, seem to emphasize maybe the Old Testament a little more. Do you agree with that?
I mean, I suppose it would depend on the flavor, right? The bent. But there is definitely an appreciation for the covenants. Mm-hmm. And of course, you know, you've got 5 major covenants in the Old Testament that all connect to the New Covenant, the New Testament. That is, of course, Actually, it's the Eucharist itself. If you look at Luke 22:20, the only mention of the word New Testament in the New Testament is when Jesus is holding up the bread at the Last Supper. He's not referring to a book. The books, were compiled some centuries later.
In the original, not the original Greek, but the Aramaic and the Greek that was written, what's the word for...
Septuagint.
No.
Yeah. Oh, what's the word for what?
For the covenant or testament. Are they interchangeable?
Yes. Convenire is the Latin, and the testamentum is Greek. Yep. It references God's relationship with mankind. Kind of intense stuff. You've got, of course, the Adamic covenant with Adam and Eve in the original sanctuary, which Father and I get into that. The fact that Eden was actually the original temple, or church, if you will. And then, of course, post-fall, you have the Noahic covenant, the Mosaic covenant, the Davidic covenant, the Abrahamic covenant, which really set everything in motion. In Genesis 12, 15, 17, and the consummation of it in Genesis 22 with Abraham and God.
I always enjoy how as it's been said, the Old Testament conceals the New, and the New Testament reveals the Old. And
yes, the Book of Hebrews and elsewhere mentions that.
What are you doing to me here, sir? Let's develop some pieces here. As I teach the students some basic principles, get control of the middle, as you're doing, then develop your pieces evenly. You don't want to have one piece bouncing all over the place. You want to get your whole team involved there. When Josh Allen snaps that ball or has that ball snapped, you want Diggs running out, you want Knox running out. You don't want just one guy running around, right? Get the whole team involved, all right?
That's right.
Good,
Spread
even
it
development
out.
there, very much so. And of course, we need to protect the king, and that's what you're doing there. You castled early on. I won't reveal the fourth one, because I don't want to give you too much of an advantage here.
Well, I do know I actually did make a mistake at the very beginning, putting the bishop out there, as you aptly described. I got flashbacks learning from an actual, I believe, right, is Father Protzik an actual chess master at this point? Does he have enough points?
Let's see. Is he above 2,000? I believe he is. I certainly would rather give him the benefit of the doubt than deny him that, because if I didn't do so, he'd probably punish me more than he usually does on the chessboard. So I have yet not had the pleasure of beating him. Played on several occasions, and the matches have been close, but that's all it takes. That's what distinguishes a major leaguer from a AAA ball player, just that little edge.
Wow. I didn't realize that you haven't. I thought you might have had him at least once, but
the last time I played, I decided to take a unorthodox approach, no pun intended, regarding his
yes,
Catholicism. But and I had an edge on him. I had a pawn on him, but of course, the master in him found a way to get around that. And you're going to chase away my bishop here, huh? All right, let's see. So. Go ahead, Kyle. What's the other topic of conversation?
As we bring up Father Protzik, shout out to him and Eastern Catholicism. He's a Byzantine Ukrainian Catholic priest in the East. Another, you mentioned how Protestants have a certain certain flavors of them have a emphasis in certain parts of the Bible, and it's so beautiful to find ways to build bridges with our fellow brothers and sisters in the community, in the faith community or beyond.
I might add, especially in these secular times where we really must stick together. We can talk about differences between ourselves theologically and so forth, but I think we need to be on the same page in a culture that's increasingly anti-religion and not out of conscious choice. It's not like people have studied this, the material that's the knowledge that's out there, but if people are denied information, then you can't expect them to have knowledge of things like that. I know it sounds condescending. It's not meant to sound condescending. It's a matter of just like anything else. If people aren't taught about something, they're not intentionally rejecting it. And especially the beauty of what Western civilization has to offer with its Greco-Roman and Judeo-Christian roots that has benefited the world over. There's just a lack, not only a lack of emphasis on that in our contemporary culture, I feel, but a conscious attempt to undermine that. Just sharing some thoughts here, man.
Why do you think that is?
I think that's a very conscious effort by the, however you want to call them, the neo-Marxists, and again, people aren't necessarily card-carrying neo-Marxists or whatever, socialist,
communists, whatever.
It's just by default. They're brought up in a secular society, but and this isn't being conspiratorial or anything like that, but the reality of it is there were attempts to undermine education, the education system, influence seminaries, as you know, and that certainly had an impact on us in the past several decades. It's always interesting to read about Bella Dodd and, and her firsthand experience about how the communists successfully infiltrated the seminaries. And
she went on record with the U.S. Congress to talk about that.
Now she got to know.
So that's not conspiratorial.
No, exactly. Yeah, some people might think that. Exactly. I don't think it is either. She got to know Archbishop Fulton Sheen. She knew Archbishop Fulton Sheen quite well, didn't she?
Yes.
He had
a big hand in her conversion.
I like to be reminded of
the first ever televangelist in America, by the way.
Can you believe that? On primetime TV?
Before, Billy Graham was probably the biggest in history of Protestant Christianity. But we've got a lot of love for Archbishop Fulton Sheen in the Catholic space.
Sure. I'm 54 years old, but I've talked to folks who are not that much older than me, and they remember Archbishop Fulton Sheen on primetime TV, when there were a minimal number of channels, but you tune in on a Saturday night and you see this Catholic Archbishop and the words of wisdom he shared. And
life is worth living. Who can't agree with that?
I challenge people. That's what I mean. If you're going to reject the teachings of the church, well, let's have an honest discussion about it. I'm open to hear your opinion. Hopefully it's substantiated.
So are you Catholic?
I certainly am, sir. Yes.
Oh, wow.
All right.
Welcome to the team.
Yeah.
Well, you've probably been in it longer than I've been alive, perhaps.
Well, let's see.
I didn't ask for your age, but
All
as
right.
long as you mentioned it, I guess I'm doxing myself as well. I'm no spring chicken either, but you've got a couple of years of wisdom on me.
Wisdom, is it, huh? Well, all right. By the fact I've been on this earth a little longer, perhaps. All right.
Yes,
what are you doing? You're attacking my bishop, are you?
I am.
Well, let's see what we're going to do here. I'm going to retreat.
Okay. I feel a little better. I've earned back the move that I made here. And, of course, Pan Zachowicz, Pan is, Polish for Mr., right?
It is.
Pan Zachowicz here has graciously allowed me home field advantage. Typically, I grab a pawn of each color and see where it goes, but for the sake of a smooth podcast introduction, we're just right here. I want to give a shout out to East to West Theology. It's a fantastic way for anybody that does want to learn more about not only the faith, but also that idea of building bridges in the community between Eastern and Western Catholics in particular. Another big kind of misnomer out there you mentioned about certain Protestants' connection with the Old Testament, heavy focus. A lot of Catholics in the West believe that it's Roman Catholicism and then Eastern Orthodox, and that's not true. There's at least 23 rites.
R-I-T-E-S, yes.
Yeah, in the Eastern Catholic Church, two of which I know the Maronites are one, and I don't recall the other. Have never ever left the church. Others at different times of, I guess you could say, political and theological periods of tension throughout history had different statuses in terms of communion with the Pope in Rome. But right now there's 23 rites in the Eastern Catholic Church. So I definitely want to show some love to that, because we dedicate that entire show to emphasizing those differences, but more importantly, what unites us, and to build bridges for our Eastern Orthodox brothers and sisters, Protestants, and anyone else that might have an interest in history or whatever else. So.
John Paul the Great, of course, talked about the church breathing with both lungs, East and West, and certainly part of my raising of my Polish consciousness has been an appreciation for the deep faith tradition ever since Mieszko. In fact, what I carry in my pocket, by the way, is a 10 zloty note. Zloty is the Polish currency. And let's see what we have here.
You really didn't have to pay me.
Yeah, I wasn't planning. There goes everything. The contents of a fortune cookie, whatever here. So, all right.
God bless you. I'm retiring.
Take 5.
Love that. It's beautiful. So who is this?
That's Mieszko. He was a duke who accepted Christianity in the year 966, and he accepted Christianity from Rome rather than from Byzantium, where Olga and Vladimir accepted that in 988, a little later. But the Christianity had come to the Slavic peoples a little earlier than that, especially to the Czechs. And remember, this is before the schism of 1054, so
Sure.
Christianity was still united. And with that acceptance of Christianity came the benefits of Western civilization. And over Poland's 1,050-plus year history, it has served as a bastion of Christianity as well as a defender of Western civilization. And I'm pretty proud of that. And in this day and age, as we're into the 21st century, not hopefully, but it seems necessarily, Poland may have to serve that role again, whether it be against physical enemies from the East or secular ideologies even from the West.
Maybe the West, yeah.
So
a war on all fronts. And it's not, unfortunately, it's reached a point where it's a physical war. It's always, a spiritual war. That's always underlying. And then, of course, I always like to say that politics is downstream from culture, but even culture itself is downstream from immutable morality. And I think that, for me,
immutable morality. Okay.
Yeah, immutable meaning unchangeable,
sure, of course.
not mutable,
not relative.
Yeah, and because we believe in our faith that of course dogmas and doctrines are unwaveringly true. That you can't say it's yes one day and then another day in future in history say it's no. That violates the principle of non-contradiction, which is the building block of all logic.
Sure.
And
the acknowledgement that truth exists,
right,
as opposed to this, the relativism or what Pope Benedict called the dictatorship of relativism.
Sure, right. And, things can, disciplines can change over time, and they have, in fact, different, the ways in which the liturgy develops and the languages that are used or that predominate. But the dogmas, doctrines, and also just the moral teaching writ large is immutable. And you really need to start from there to build a healthy culture, I believe.
Absolutely.
And that's not even necessarily a religious statement. In philosophy, of course, you see the great early philosophers. I'm partial to the Greek philosophers, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Really emphasized the importance of virtue being at the helm of leadership of any kind, political or otherwise. And
again, when those foundational building blocks are disregarded or consciously attempted to be torn down, as those who espouse ideologies that stemmed out of the French Revolution, even before that, and certainly into Marxism and so forth, when that is intentionally intended, to be discarded, this is where civilization then crumbles, because the intent is to radically change society. And I'm not sure what's the motivation for it. Is it this narcissism? Is it this egoism that's right out of the Garden of Eden that says I can be my own God and determine what's right and wrong? And as long as collectively we're on the same page, that we say, yeah, I have my truth, you have your truth, we'll all get along. But if someone dares to make a substantiated truth claim and says, no, 5 + 3 is 8, it's nothing else, but then they're going to be called intolerant. And I'm just using that as an example. If we make a certain claim about whether it be human sexuality or about a number of other issues that have been accepted as societal norms, not only because they're practical, because it's, again, a reflection of the truth. I'm trying to think of some other examples, but all this is being undermined by some of these radical ideologies coming from the left.
It's tough. And for me, I guess I'll just explain quickly. The reason I self-identify as an apolitical person is because I heavily lean on my faith just to develop virtue and to try to be the best man of God I could possibly be. That's where I'm at in my life journey. And but again, as I mentioned before, with that comes, for example, one of the virtues, it's a sub-virtue of justice itself, is patriotism. Right? Patriotism is the virtue whereby you show due honor to the land that you live in, right? That to show an appreciation for having that. And of course, the way that pans out depends on the level of virtue of the leaders in that government too. But part of, getting involved is voting, and voting is so sacred. It needs to be protected. It needs to be, reliable and everything else, a representation of the people's will. And for me, it seems that, and I'd like to get your take on this, I suppose, because again, we're not having a political conversation right now. This is more kind of philosophical. This is like what transcends the politics. It's almost above it, and that's the whole point for my modus operandi. I think that in America, obviously, there's a heavy emphasis on Democrats or Republicans, like two sides. And you mentioned, the radical left. They don't even really seem to represent mainline Democrats at all anymore, which of course is one issue. But then of course you got the radical right. So, I remember a priest telling me once upon a time, or maybe it was a deacon, that if you go too far on either direction, the ends touch. It's like a circle. And it's ironic because the people that are so far left or the people that are so far right, even though they absolutely hate each other, they practically act exactly like each other. At least when it comes to the lack of virtue that they exemplify, because virtue lies in the mean. Virtue is, it's about being balanced.
A lack of virtue might be the common link. I'm not sure if that's a uniting force or not, and I'm not sure I fully agree. Maybe we can elaborate on it if you wanted.
Please do. I'm happy to. Yeah, I haven't moved because I'm feeling very.
My last move was chasing my bishop over there.
You know what? Let me do something wild.
Okay, you're going to go after
I'm just going to look after your king right there.
All right. Well, you know what I'm going to do? Let's see here. I'm just going to respond by moving my own knight over here.
Whoa!
Let's see. So, with that in mind, let's back up a little bit. This isn't about political parties per se. It's not like, I've been born and bred into party A, and I'm going to live or die with party A, whatever that might be.
Right.
There are some folks out there that, I've been voting this way for 40 years, and I'm going to keep voting this way. And
sure.
It's just a matter of looking at
the set in their ways.
Sure. Being raised on Buffalo's east side, my grandfathers came from partitioned Poland, like many folks in our community. Their ancestors came from distant lands, and they brought with them those values of faith, family, a love for freedom. My grandmothers were actually born here, but their parents were from Poland. But they came to America and embraced American exceptionalism, embraced the idea that this is a land of opportunity that they were denied back in their homelands for various reasons, whether it's because, in the case of Polish immigrants, they had lost their freedom for 123 years, and just seeking to work hard, raise a family.
You touched on that during the piano intro.
What's that?
You touched on that, the 123-year period, yeah.
Yes. Poland had has a very glorious and tragic history over the course of a millennium plus, very similar to that of the United States. Like humanity, indeed. I point out the unique similarities between Poland and the United States. At the end of the 18th century, both had, well, of course, the United States had the world's first constitution in 1787 was ratified, correct? And then Poland had the world's second constitution, first in Europe, and on May 3rd, 1791, which is a big day to celebrate. Wow. More so than Dingus Day around here. That's another story we can get into.
That's a Polish-American phenomenon.
Indeed.
And a very fun one at that.
That is true. We've both partaken in the past, and
Indeed.
we'll continue to do so.
Oh, of course.
Responsibly, of course.
Yes. Just like I'm going to responsibly put you in check.
Got it. Okay, now that was the fourth opening principle, but we're into the game already. The first, remember, was get control of the middle, develop your pieces evenly, protect your king. The fourth was don't bring your queen out too early.
Oh!
But it's not that early, so it's okay. We've already covered those first three, so let's see. You're putting me in check. Well, 3 ways to get out of check, correct, as I teach my students. Either run away, block, or capture the piece that's putting you in check. I'm not able to do that third one, so I could either block. Oh, that's pretty jive of you, man. I was hoping to use my queen in some other capacity. So
it's probably the best I've ever done against you thus far.
Well, let's see here. And if I move my king, I'm going to block in my bishop here. So
notice I say that when no pieces are gone yet. There's a lot of game left.
Well, let's see what we're going to do here. All right, I'm going to block with the old queen.
Ooh.
So
I have an opportunity to get first blood.
You do. Again, my one of my grandfathers, well, they both came here around 1905, and one of them served in the American Army during the First World War, volunteered, wanting to adopt his homeland. Yeah, that's it, his new homeland, and learned the English language in order to be a productive entity here in society, as we all should do. We can acknowledge this as a former British colony, and that's why we're speaking English. And we're very, very grateful that America is such a land of opportunity where freedom can exist. I don't just say that in such a vague way. Freedom, yes, as John Paul II reminds us, is not doing what you want, but rather having the right to do what you ought. So you put me in check again. Now I have to get out of check. If I've moved my king, shock, exactly. Checkmate, from the term death of the Shah, right? Well, if I capture with my king, that means I won't be able to castle. But since the queens will be eliminated from the board, it may not be that important to castle. So, and I don't want to retract with my knight, but I think I may have to. No, I'm going to go for it.
Ooh.
All right. So, where were we?
The queens are dead, folks.
Yes, long live the kings. So my grandfathers, like so many other, came here. One of them worked in a grain mill, another one worked in a foundry. And the point is, by the early 60s, when my parents were already had families of their own, it was just normal to vote for the Democrat Party because there's the party of FDR and Truman and JFK. The latter two are especially very patriotic, staunch anti-communists, and the Democrat Party was perceived as that of the working class, and there was sort of this inaccurate or not perception that the Republican Party was that of the rich wasps and the sort of disconnected from the working class.
White Anglo-Saxon Protestants.
Sure. As a teenager, though, growing up in the 80s, listening to Ronald Reagan speak, I was really attracted to the things he was saying, really instilled within me a deeper sense of patriotism. I mean, I had some already, knowing that my grandfather had served in the First World War. I had an uncle that served during World War II, was part of D-Day. And my dad served during the Korean War. So
As did my grandfather.
About that. Wow.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Tell me about him.
Corps of Engineers, he was the man that would come in and put the country back together.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And we thank him for his service.
Yes, indeed, as well as your family.
Yeah, it's so without a doubt there was a great sense of patriotism, appreciation for America, American greatness, the opportunities that America has given us. Yeah, Ronald Reagan was a big influence on me, especially during the height of the Cold War. Now you can move that night. Before it was pinned because your queen was back there, but now it's moving around here. Let's see what you're up to. Well, I know what we're going to do. Maybe not, actually. Let's focus on our conversation while the gears move here.
Indeed. I've prayed for many, many years about the idea of playing a game while having a conversation, and sharing it with friends. Here we are.
I've had the pleasure of doing that with our mutual friend,
Dennis G.
His chess playing skills have really improved over the last 3-4 years since I've known him. So, Dennis G.
As he is known.
All right, in circles. And we all know Uncle Steve, right, of course? And
yes. Gandalf.
Is that what he's referred to?
Uncle Stefan, yes.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm just going to develop my bishop.
Another chess master in his own right.
Again, I was a Democrat because, they represented the blue-collar values with which I was raised. But in recent decades, you could see the influence of far-left ideologies that just were trying to penetrate American society in some way, and they found a comfortable home, it seems, within the Democrat Party. And I just wish folks out there who have been staunch Democrats would either recognize that more or have the courage to speak out against it before it's too late.
You see some mainliners like Bill Maher and whoever else doing that, which is interesting to watch. It's like,
because there was so much more in common.
Elon Musk,
sure,
another classically hardcore Democrat. Now he gets yelled at for being far right. It's like, wait, what?
Yeah, isn't it amazing?
It is wild out there.
Oh, I wish more Democrats would recognize that and be a little more outspoken.
Well, the country that your family moved in from Poland to participate in its values and the opportunity for anyone to make a life here versus juxtaposing that on the state of the nation and where things have gone over time, what would you say is how has that shaped your current trajectory in life to try to make a positive impact in the community. You mentioned the people, you understand how the older population, certain people tend to just vote for their party. And it's because they have this deep-seated affiliation and or perception about who is whom. But what I'm hearing you say is that realities become a lot more complicated. You can't just state Democrat or Republican and have those be the two main words that represent all of the different entities that are vying for, I guess we could say, power in this day and age, right? And there needs to be a balance.
People are recognizing that as well, particularly in the town of Cheektowaga. I see some trends changing, and maybe the party affiliation hasn't officially been changed, but they know in their heart they want people in elected office who are patriotic folks, who embrace traditional values that have worked to build and sustain civilization, and they don't want some of these radical elements that are creeping in, as already evident at the national and certainly the state level. I've spoken to some state senators, state assembly people, and they see what's going on in Albany, and they know it's coming down the proverbial turnpike sometime soon. So one of my motivations for getting involved in politics, again, I'd rather look upon it as office holding and being a public servant,
right,
is not only advocating for things such as just keeping property taxes low, just a better use of our tax dollars, so working on our infrastructure, making sure in this case the county roads are taken care of, funding the police as opposed to let's take a look at some of the
I have an idea. How about we defund them?
I think not, Kyle. We've seen what's been going on.
Okay.
Right. But yet there are certain fringe political parties that have that as their basic platform.
I've actually heard about that becoming popular in the last few years.
Certainly. And unfortunately, there are people, members of one of the mainstream parties, who are accepting endorsements from that party. I'm not out to bash them, but the reality of it is these are some of the what do you call it, points that they want to emphasize in their platform. Working families are great. My dad was a union grain miller, and everybody's in favor of that. But as is often the case, the left uses quasi-deceptive terms maybe to appeal to people. And we just have to make people aware of what certain party platforms are really about,
right,
and then leave it up to them after they're informed a little more to make that decision. I mean, that's what's great. This is a democracy. People can vote, but we want to ensure that people are informed of issues as well. And that's what scares me about some of these radical left elements coming into our society. So,
I couldn't agree with you more. Coming from a military family and having personally served multiple law enforcement agencies, I've gotten the opportunity in my life's journey to see all different sides of the aisle in terms of how people identify politically. In fact, it's one of the reasons I've become the person that I have, where for me as a person of faith, I think of the important role of a saint as the spiritual referee over any one or side or the other that claims to represent 50% of the voice, or however much, however you want to slice that. Reality is a lot more nuanced than that, and there's you have to watch out for abuses on either side, so to speak. But one thing that I know is not a political statement is that just as everyone matters, the police do a very, very, very noble job. I know the leadership very well in Cheektowaga in the police force, and I'm sure they don't want to be defunded.
No, and the neighbors, for the most part, don't want to be defunded either.
Right.
Even that term matters. Do lives really matter, or do lives have inherent dignity? And, I don't even like using the term matters, that things matter.
Well, actually, that's a good philosophical point in the sense that it's not even about what we do that dignifies us. It's about who we are. Right. It's self-evident that we exist and that we have inherent dignity. This idea that it's what you do that makes you important it reminds me of the utilitarian heresy, actually. It's erroneous belief that, because you could very quickly slide down to ends justifying the means and whatever else. Like, you just gotta, accomplish tasks, but it's not about even action, we say in philosophy, that dignifies the human soul. It's existence itself.
Sure, made in the image and likeness of God, indeed. It's part of this, I don't know how human exceptionalism comes into this, but I don't think it's wrong to point that out, that we are distinct from the other creatures, that we have free will and intellect, rationality, precisely. The rest of creation also has what are the other elements? Instinct and appetites and
sure.
Clue me in on this. I forgot the other.
Yeah, locomotion, vegetation. Sure. I mean, you're hitting on it. Mm-hmm. I just speak from a Thomistic lens predominantly. So whatever definitions I throw out there as working definitions today are within a defined framework.
But we've seen in societies where human dignity is undermined or neglected how, as you said, how utilitarian people can be regarded. We've seen these ideologies in the 20th century, particularly those that have stemmed from Marxism, socialism, communism, which all have common links, how disastrous.
Well, hundreds of millions of
people, and misery and poverty. So it really concerns me how, especially the younger generation, is enamored by these ideologies, that they somehow think that socialism is beneficial, or even, democratic socialism. I mean, it all reeks of the same. It's all connected. Essentially anti-Western civilization.
Well, that reminds me of a question I was about to ask, and you got to let me know what you're going to do about this guy.
About your wee little pawn sneaking in there.
Yes.
Well, what you got here?
But I was gonna emphasize that obviously that reality is a lot more nuanced than just one party or the other. Mm-hmm. And for me, as someone who thinks like, it's important to be a spiritual referee over either side or whatever might come from these different rogue entities or mainline entities. It reminds me of a quote that I heard recently that, it's so important if you're called to be involved in the life of politics actively, as opposed to maybe more of a passive voter like myself. It has to start grassroots. Like, it just has to. So I commend that you're doing that. I'm not an endorser. I'm just a longtime friend of yours. But the fact that you are, putting your money where your mouth is, in the sense of trying to make a positive impact. You come from these Polish roots. Obviously very well. I've always been impressed by your not only your historical prowess, but your ability to remember the dates and the times and the details, and to make it relevant and alive today. It's very important to know your history in order to understand, where we came from, how things have ended up being the way they are, and how we want things to become how we end up wanting them to be. Obviously, they say history repeats itself. You don't want to repeat the mistakes.
Or it certainly rhymes, right?
Yes, of course it rhymes over sets of, even in precise decades and centuries, it seems sometimes. I wonder if there's an intelligent design behind that. Benevolent or preternatural, perhaps. But, so what I heard was, the quote was, it's so important to get involved in both sides at the grassroots level. So one, it starts grassroots, and two, it's really convincing hearts and minds of the truths behind the ideas that we're conveying right now with this conversation. And again, that really transcends party at the end of the day, because we're talking about philosophical realities about the dignity of human life.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned truths again, and this is what is really at stake. There is what you might call an assault on reality.
Sure, 5 + 3 = 9.
Yes, and that's because it's your opinion, or what, 5 + 3 is 8, not because Michael Zachowicz says 5 + 3 is 8, or
because it feels good.
Sure, but rather
feelings-based response.
Indeed. But rather, I say that 5 + 3 is 8, and hopefully you say that 5 + 3 is 8, and everybody else out there says 5 + 3 is 8. Why?
What do you say? Let us know in the comments below.
And the reason is because the reality is 5 + 3 is 8, right?
Yes, indeed.
So regarding our faith, again, it's unfortunate we can't have civil dialogue and exchange of ideas, but people are so hostile to that. I'm a Catholic Christian by choice. Of course, I was baptized into it. Nobody has any control over being born or stating the obvious. Mm-hmm. But in retrospect, I'm glad my parents baptized me. I went to Catholic school. I can criticize post-Vatican II Christian or Catholic education that's another story.
Well, infant baptism, just to give a theological nod to that, our Lord said, "Suffer not the little ones to be kept from me."
Oh, I'm totally in line with it.
Yeah. Don't keep the kids from me.
I just mean, as far as knowledge of the faith goes, I mean, you don't expect a 10 or 11-year-old to grasp all these things, but in general, in retrospect, I think, wow, we could have learned so much more about our faith and the Western intellectual tradition.
Even just bringing Latin back in even public schools.
Oh, sure.
I mean, the National Review study showed that students do 50% better on every subject just by taking on Latin.
Because you see the roots of some of the words, you have a better grasp, a more precise grasp of vocabulary. And that reminds me, I just want to give a plug out to the Chesterton Academy out there. I had the pleasure of teaching geometry there for a little while, and just what a great school. There's some 40 of them around the country, but we have one here in Western New York.
We were the second. I helped get the second one up and running. You and I were not teaching at the same time, but it's actually while I worked there way back towards the beginning years that I learned about that staff from National Review. Wow,
it's a great curriculum they have. It's very affordable as well. Nothing against some of the other private schools in the area, but tuition is pretty reasonable there. And what a wonderful education your children or grandchildren can get at the Chesterton Academy of Buffalo. I mean, the curriculum is so great. How it's
comprehensive and classical.
Yes, exactly, through a Catholic lens. So a freshman year, they study Greek philosophy, some Latin literary classics, correct? Euclidean geometry, which is what I was teaching, ancient history, right? Second year, you're looking at New Testament theology. You can explain it even a little more.
Well, I can speak to the philosophical lens. That's what I taught. I taught 11th grade philosophy, and grades 9 through 12, they both interrelate to each other within that same year, but there's also a chronology to it in terms of historical relevance. And by 11th grade, you get into Thomistic philosophy predominantly, but then we also started to introduce Cartesian notes in the 1500s there. A couple centuries later, you had, of course, nominalism before that, and then you had Descartes' famous cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am. Just such a obvious statement, but somehow it became this profundity that is impacting mankind to this day. It's really, he's considered the father of modern philosophy, and it flipped mankind's relationship to the creator. It gave it an about face. And we've been reeling from that ever since. But, you get, of course, like you said, the early Greek fathers and everything else in the philosophical component to it. And then you get all the way through the Middle Ages and then beyond, and then the precursor to modern man. And by 12th grade, they take it from there to present. And
any graduate of the Chesterton Academy, it's so impressive how what a rich source of knowledge they have, and their ability to debate. And I kind of feel bad about a lot of products of contemporary public education, how they're denied some of these things. And I must say, there's so many challenges in contemporary education just because the kids are so distracted, especially with their electronic devices and societal pressures and so forth. But I just lament sometimes. I think, wow, there's so many kids who are graduated from high school and they don't have a mastery nor appreciation for those fundamentals of civilization.
Well, this is one area where you and I are kindred spirits, right? I mean, a really profound way to make a positive impact on the community is to educate.
Of course, to instruct the ignorant is one of the, it's a work of mercy. Is
Indeed.
At all levels, at all ages, I should say. I mean, we're constantly learning. There's just, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't learn. Don't know.
Right, and life is a constant conversion journey every single day until you pass. There's always something to learn, and there's always something to work on, to act on, right? It starts in the intellect, and then you have to, St. Teresa of Calcutta says the greatest journey is from the head to the heart, right? And, we say if your heart is in it, it's your will. What is it that we will? Hopefully it's in accordance with right reason, because if you usurp the interior kingdom, you're going to get all kinds of, I don't even know what.
Again, it all goes back to, searching for truth. And objective truth, things that are good, true, and beautiful, and we've lost the sense of a desire for that, and that can easily be restored. This is what I think. It's there, man. But there are so many obstacles in our contemporary society that either lure people we're all victims of this, right? I mean, we're all struggling sinners striving for sainthood, are we not?
Indeed.
But when we have a sense of community, a sense of being on the same page, you can help each other in this struggle here. All right, let's see. Your night, I'm not liking it over here too much.
Try to force my hand.
Music. That just reminded me of something, of these things that affect our contemporary culture. I'm a big classical music fan, and
Sure.
I'm grateful. Let's even go back further than that. Again, stating the obvious, nobody's born with knowledge, and it's our job to cultivate that within our children, our community. And so there's such a profound sense of gratitude that I have, we all have, about towards people who have positively influenced us, whether it be our parents, family members, friends of our family members, some older ones, and of course teachers. I have some great memories of teachers both at Bishop Turner and at Bishop Timon High Schools, where I attended 2 years each. And Father Joseph Janacek, I hear he recently passed away, I heard, but in the Western Civilization course he was teaching, he had us learn about great philosophers, great artists, great writers, great musicians. It was sort of part of an enrichment segment, and I'm really grateful for that. And I just see a lack of appreciation for that in our contemporary pop culture, and music, of all the art forms, there's such a small percentage maybe that appreciate contemporary art or contemporary literature, but almost everybody's listening to contemporary music, whether you approve of the different genres or not. You hear songs played all over the place. So that's an area that I think can be very instrumental, no pun intended, in helping people again appreciate the bigger picture of what civilization has brought us. So I'm a big classical music fan. It started as a nerdy teenager. I think Father Joe was helpful in that as well, talking about different composers. So as a nerdy teenager...
Father Joe who?
Father Joe Janacek. I made reference to him. He just passed away.
Oh, God rest his soul.
Yes. Let's see. I used to ride my bicycle from the east side of Buffalo. I lived on Ruhlin off of Sycamore, to the Frontenac Library on Broadway, and borrow these...
Shock.
What is that? Shock. Yes, right.
I don't want to interrupt
You know what, though? I think
important roots story.
Yeah, let's see what we're going to do here. I'm going to take it with this one here, and there's a method to this. So,
I'm taking notes.
You remember Hooked on Classics? It was kind of a cornball recording consisting of segments of classical pieces.
Might have been before my time.
Yeah,
I remember Hooked on Phonics.
K-Tel presents.
That's what I remember.
Hooked on Phonics as well. No, but K-Tel presents Hooked on Classics. It was Louis Stevenson and the Royal Philharmonic or something. So there were these different excerpts put together, maybe 15, 20, and all with this cornball electronic beat. Great to do your aerobics to or whatever. And then I would listen to them and think, I'm going to go out and get the entire piece. So there was even like a Hooked on Bach section. They'd start out with the Bach Gounod Ave Maria, and then lead into something from Anna Magdalena's Notebook, and then one of the Brandenburg concertos or the orchestral suites. Anyway, so I would borrow these records, these old scratchy records from the library, and then transfer them onto some cheap Radio Shack cassette, whatever, and build up my classical library. But the wealth of information that was found in the record album, in the jacket and all that, I mean, it's you can read about the composer's history, about the historical context, the particular conductor or ensemble, and just such a wealth of knowledge. And how can you not just be so interested in classical music once you learn about this? This is just great music. So again, I don't think the kids these days are rejecting great classical music. I mean, they've had zero exposure to it other than hearing it connected to some commercials or whatever, and thinking, this is elevator music or whatever. I mean, there's some pretty dynamic stuff out there. Great music from the Baroque era and the classical composers and so forth. That's just my plug for classical music and how that can help foster again that recovery of civilization that we seem to be drifting away from.
Well, at the risk of sounding radical and completely dropping off people who are younger than 18, so they can't vote anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But I know of not a few families that don't allow televisions in the home.
Mm-hmm.
Some people might think, what? That's extreme. That's radical. It's like, I think if you're gonna develop a young mind that has the attention span to pick up on some of those finer, works of art and the beauty that's objectively there, it really comes with a radical lifestyle change than what maybe you're seeing in some of the mainstream homes today. I don't know if we're going to change hearts and minds on a mass scale anytime soon about that. But I mean, it starts with just saying, I know people that do that, and it works really well for them. You know what I mean?
Parents need to have that authority.
No question.
Exactly.
It starts
of course,
there.
That's one of the problems in our society as well.
Building block.
The government wants to have a little more influence on
be the parent.
Decision. Sure, exactly. And it's all consistent with that ideology. Again, that's an assault, not only assault on reality, but challenging civilizational norms.
Well, here's this. If God's our Father, as we believe in the faith, of course, there's different viewpoints that really shun that belief system. But if God's our Father, and if there's many, if not most people alive believe something like that, then this idea of patrimony becomes a lot less scary sounding, because what you're referring to when you say patrimony, it's not about men are the leaders and holding women down. Far from it. What it means is to have a fatherland, which I believe is what's referred to in Poland, right?
Ojczyzna is the name, yes.
Some say motherland, but other countries identify as fatherland. If you think about it, when it goes back to Abraham and the 12 tribes of Israel, that comprised eventually a nation, it started with families. Mm-hmm. And the whole nation was a nation of 12 tribes of family members. So a patrimony meant you have a fatherland, literally, because you're developed a land of family members. So that and obviously, I think Plato says we shouldn't really even have republics bigger than 2,000 citizens. Mm-hmm. I think the point he was getting at was the bigger it gets, the more impersonal it becomes. It's kind of like how in jurisprudence, if you have this massive legal document, the more massive it is, the less binding it becomes. It's like, things are pointed when everyone's invested in this community. And so patrimony sounds a lot less scary if you think about it like that. At the end of the day, it comes down to, whether you're related to everybody that you know in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, I'm not even getting into like matters of the sixth and ninth commandment or things that involve relations within a family here. But if you're related to someone, you want them to be virtuous. If you're not related to someone by blood, you still want your leaders to be virtuous. It's a common thread, no matter what. It's a common denominator. But people have kind of lost that idea. That's why they have this like hatred for the other that's out there, that government that doesn't represent me and this and that. It's like, I would love to see, communities take responsibility for taking care of each other. Because that's where it starts. It starts with the family. Limited
government, in other words. Government to provide those essentials for a society to function, but not to penetrate every strata of society and replace the role of the parent.
It's the principle of subsidiarity.
Yes, but it's important in order for that power to be gained by those who seek those, to implement these radical ideologies, that you have to undermine the traditional family, attack the patriarchy, as it's been called, and we need to recognize that. That's the first step, to recognize that this is part of the agenda. It's a conscious agenda. It's very scary out there. Getting back to Archbishop Fulton Sheen, he referred to communism as a vulture that can only feed on decayed matter. So,
wow.
Yeah. So, if we are strong and our civilization is strong, we have strong families rooted in faith and reason, communism doesn't stand a chance. Why would it be appealing to anybody? But only when those fundamentals have been eroded. Again, infiltration into the educational system, into the church. Just society's been so secularized. Now there's this dead remnant of a once thriving civilization. The vulture of communism can swoop in and, eat off of it.
They say only a small percentage of the populace needs to be convinced to get on board. if certain other things are in place.
Yeah.
And then they really kind of force it on people because the vast majority of people are never going to ever be on board with something that's inherently irrational. If the government is the god or the leader, the state is the supreme force in your life, it's necessarily antithetical to, as you mentioned, Judeo-Christian values.
And we, unfortunately, as people, we tend to be apathetic or passive, and we really need a boost to combat a form of government or a form of just the prevailing ideology that's coming to play. We sort of just accept, that's the way things are, and gradually, like the proverbial frog that gets, boil in the water when the heat gets turned up.
Sure.
So we need to recognize these things, and I guess that's one of the reasons I wanted to get involved in public service. Again, as I was saying before, the practical things, keeping the roads paved, keeping the taxes low, that's right, you know what, I was willing to make that sacrifice and grab 2 pawns and lose either a bishop or a knight, but at this point we exchanged, you know what though, let's try something else. Yeah, let's do this here, Mr. Gorlick. I'm going to take your other knights.
That's Gorlitsky.
I think it was originally, yes. Let's see what we're going to do there. I would presume you're going to take my bishop, of course.
So, briefly, let's get your reaction.
Just continuing with the thought, though.
Oh, yes.
Not only the practical things proactively to provide for our community, the taxpayers in particular, but also to be defensive against and be aware against attempts for these ideologies that have already influenced things at the national and state level, and make sure that they don't get into our communities before it's too late. There's a simple point there. I just hope that common sense will prevail. People, that's what my campaign is about, and that of others, particularly the folks in Cheektowaga and I presume elsewhere throughout our county. We just want some common sense leadership back in our community. Something we think we've maybe lost. Okay, wonderful. So what I'm going to do then... It
does appear that it needs to occur.
Now you have...
an open flank right to my king.
Yes, precisely. That's the plan. Ooh. And you have doubled up and isolated pawns on the H file. So anyway...
Well, what's your take, in reference to everything that you just mentioned? And obviously I realize you're running for local government, so we're not talking about, national or even international considerations. That being said, I'm going to ask this just as an individual contributor and a voter, because the reason I tend to connect with what you're explaining right now, this idea that we just need to get back to common sense. We need to recognize that there's more people that think like this than don't.
And to motivate these people.
And there needs to be that connection to act, right?
Sure.
You start by networking and recognizing, okay, we see that there's something going on. We either band together or die. And then you act accordingly, right? I guess I'll ask, what's your take on what's going on around the world right now? Because instinctively, just as an individual contributor in my own local community, I sense that with, this will be coming out this Friday, but we're cutting midweek of the middle of October right now. We got news over this past weekend about the invasion in Israel by Hamas in Gaza and in Palestine, and now it sounds like there's going to be a two-front war.
Mm-hmm.
There's the north with Hezbollah and Lebanon, and all these different things happening. It seems to me that from a theological perspective, they're saying this is the biggest attack since Israel was founded, May 14th, 1948, and that it's the biggest loss of life since the Yom Kippur War, and so it's over. That was over 50 years ago, so it's obviously a big deal, and we know there is no nation mentioned more in the Bible than Israel. It's going to connect to anywhere from the WASPs to the Catholics to the Muslims that are involved in that region to everybody, you know, and of course the Jews. And so it just, to me, as a family man, it seems like another tick in the ether that shows that mankind has gotten away from the stability that comes with virtue, right? Our Lady of Fatima says that war is a consequence for sin. So what's your like initial reaction that it does seem that things are heating up around the world, and it probably speaks to your point that it's more important now than ever for people on the local level to band together and to fight for what you believe in?
Certainly, not only in the Middle East, like you said, in other parts of the world, but the Middle East has such a unique historical and theological significance. Again, we're just talking as friends. This isn't part of any kind of political platform, because again, I'm seeking an office at a local level to try to just make my community better.
Sure.
But of course, I know it's so cliche to say our prayers and thoughts go out, but no, in reality, we need to pray. I mean, sincerely pray for peace in the Middle East. And this is a struggle between civilization and barbarism to some extent. Now, I'm open to hearing the perspective of those who have committed these atrocities, because something must be motivating them to do so, that they really think this is virtuous behavior to slaughter innocent women and children. I mean, what is the rationale behind this? Or is there a lack of rationale? And maybe this is where you have something that's fundamentally incompatible with our way of thinking. But we have to, I personally would support Israel in its defense, and for them to do what they need to do to not avenge in a revengeful way, but to teach the oppressor a lesson, not just to even things out, but to make sure that this does not happen again, and for the perpetrators to be, you know, culpable and just be punished for what the horrific things that they've done. So, well,
the thing that kills me, sorry to intervene, but the thing that kills me the most is, you know, because I listen, I've got a lot of friends that are Ukrainian. I've got a lot of friends that are Russian, right? So we talk about, you know, I mentioned it's just another tick. It's like, that's obviously raging as well at the same time. And that's why it's such a challenging time to be alive, you know, when navigating all of the things that we're talking about right now, right? Living a life of virtue, trying to live as an individual family person, your faith as best you understand it, navigating politics for those who are called to. It's all connected. We're talking about civilization, as you said, right? That's the common thread. And when I hear all of that, you know, I respect and deeply empathize with the fact that people are going to think from the perspective of, you know, people tend to flock to their country, right? Particularly if they believe it's a virtuous country. And so it's so hard to say, you know, oh, this one's right and this one's wrong. It's just, war is ugly, but
sometimes, you know, necessary.
And we believe in, of course, we believe in the just war doctrine in Catholicism, right? That you do need to stand up for, that's part of standing up for justice. Here's where I struggle. You mentioned barbarism. You know, we're getting reports that people are committing sexual atrocities against the women, and God forbid if it's the children, but God forbid writ large, and that does not jive with just war doctrine, ever.
Of course not.
How could you don't mistreat civilians, even if you're capturing them for a time? You don't mistreat them.
Or using them as bargaining chips, or whatever it might be.
It's like a form of human trafficking. So again, it's not even about who's to blame. You know, everybody's like, oh, how did, you know, Israel, how did they allow it to happen when they have the best technology ever? Why would Hamas do that? What's the point? You know, like at the end of the day, to me, it's like we're human beings and we have dignity and inherent life, and obviously that's a line that you shouldn't cross.
But that presumption that we make, that we are all human beings with inherent dignity, may not be embraced by all cultures, and that's unfortunate. We presume that.
Well, let's back to the utilitarian heresy. You provide me some sort of a good or service, or else you're useless to me. Right? You can't apply utilitarianism to human beings.
I'm just surprised by the reaction of some folks. There were some demonstrations or shows of support in New York City and elsewhere for the actions of Hamas. And I would just like to understand what's your rationale in thinking. Why do you feel this way? How can you lend support to these people that are committing such horrible acts against your fellow man? And yes, humanity is very complex indeed. It's an understatement, but it's, again, we can sincerely pray for peace. And of course, our prayers are more effective when we ourselves are in a state of grace, when we
It's the only way they're effective.
Yeah, I know. I struggle with that a lot. Like, man, I'm ardently praying, but how effective are they? If I just gotta be in a good place regarding my soul. So, that's the solution to all of societal problems, right? If we're striving for goodness, and individually we know we're leading virtuous lives, the rest falls into place. It might sound oversimple, and it is complicated, but that's a simple formula for what makes civilization tick.
Right.
But when we're not taught these virtues in schools, our kids are not instilled with these values of what is right and wrong behavior, because we've glorified the self. It's like this narcissism of the individual being so important.
Should kids have social media?
That's another issue. I mean, as a teacher in recent years, I saw the effects of that, the obsession with these TikTok videos and so forth. And, the internet can be such a wonderful tool as far as the amount of educational materials on there. Great historical videos, great speeches by people, a plethora of great information. But, like anything else, if it's not utilized for good means, it can be an instrument for things that are less than optimal for our society. All right, developing a pawn, are you? Well,
yes, indeed.
Let's do this here first. Let's move our bishop over here just to get him into play a little more.
Yeah, I've worked for multiple schools, and I remember, and one that of course won't be named, just talking to the teachers and explaining the importance of developing critical thinking. And they literally had no idea what I was talking about.
Wow.
It was weird. Mm-hmm. It was weird. And I'm not trying to overgeneralize or caricaturize whatsoever here, but I'm
critical thinking in the sense of
serious.
Challenging some concepts in an attempt to find truth that transcends our opinions.
I was just throwing down basic logical principles.
And what was their reaction to it?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh, I see. They're just completely unfamiliar with it. It's not like they were championing relativism in response to it. They're just saying
they literally were not educated to understand the concepts I was throwing out.
It's like trying to talk about differential equations or linear algebra with people who can't add double-digit numbers, right?
Yeah, these are teachers in their 20s and maybe
with
even
their
30s
certifications and everything like that, right? And of course, that's not the case. Wonderful teachers out there, of course.
Definitely.
Oh
not.
man,
I think this was. I hope to believe this was not the norm, but that it exists.
It's a little more prevalent in recent years, I'd say, because these new teachers, younger teachers, a greater percentage of them, I should say, are a product themselves of this education system. It's very sad.
Something.
And that's why parents need to be the primary educators in the sense of making sure, knowing what the kids are being taught in school. So parents need to be empowered a little more, and we have to encourage parents who are otherwise busy with their daily lives, working jobs, multiple jobs, both parents working whatever it takes to pay the bills.
Yes.
That they also have to be aware of what's going on in the schools, what the kids are being taught, to be watchdogs if you must. And they have every right to do that, to be so. Yes,
It's true.
Shout out to our radio listeners, or our online listeners who might not be visually seeing what's happening over here.
Well,
we have to have this big pause to.
As Pan Zachowicz just advocated for parental rights in the school, in the schoolyards, at the PTA meetings, and everything else, Pan Gorlick is waging probably his final assault before his king gets bombarded to Kingdom Come here.
We're just going to make a little rook move here, going from H8 to G8 and administering a little check.
Yeah, this isn't good. We've got a bishop, a rook, and a knight converging. I got to be able to free up my pieces over here.
Let's see here, Kyle. A sense of patriotism we need to foster in our communities again. That's very important. We can talk about having pride in our ethnic backgrounds, and I'm all for that, because me becoming, having greater awareness of my forefathers' cultural contributions makes me a better American. And we can't expect to find unity in this country unless we really embrace those common ideals that were brought to this continent from faraway lands of our ancestors who came here. And even those who are, who've been here for several generations, they've embraced those values, and that's what has made America strong. And we need to champion those values. But if there's this revisionist history being taught in our schools, that America isn't this great place, a land of opportunity, and this great experiment as a constitutional republic, no wonder that the kids will not be raised being proud of their of the heritage of this country, and be prone then to some of these ideologies that are being taught out there and have been for decades. Like the old joke goes, if you're not a liberal at age 20, you have no heart. If you're not a conservative at 40, you have no brain. Yeah, and that's so true. Just thinking of the days at University of Buffalo, a hotbed of secular humanism that I attended in the late 80s and early 90s. And it was a bit shocking to me at first. That goes back to something else. The Marxists, and I'm sorry to just brand them as such, but how else to put them, neo-Marxists, whatever, they know that they have to come up with something that's antithetical to Western civilization. They have to have a well-formulated plan, because the natural order, the natural flow of things, we don't need a manifesto to say that we need a strong family, we need a free market economy, we need all these things that have made civilization great. But in order to come up with something that wants to tear that down, it has to be very well formulated. And we see in the...
Well, they use Hegelian dialecticism.
Right.
Dialecticalism.
Mm-hmm.
They, there's
the thesis and antithesis and the synthesis and so forth. There's a whole series of this, yeah.
That's how communism started.
Precisely.
Right? That's how you replace God with the Übermensch, or the state.
Mm-hmm.
And this atheistic... backdrop that takes its place, because nature abhors a vacuum, right?
Nature abhors a vacuum, correct.
So if you're going to remove something, you're going to replace it with something else. But that dialectical word salad definitely has been doing a number.
We're seeing the effects of that.
And that's why it's so important to develop critical thinking, because you literally are not going to see it otherwise.
As opposed to critical theory.
It's like a blind spot.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you don't have the syllogisms, right? I was teaching the students syllogisms, syllogistic realities. Like if-then statements. This can only be logical because of this principle of non-contradiction. Something cannot both be and not be at the same time in the same place, right? You have to understand, you have to start from there, and you have to develop from there, like all the different logical fallacies, right? The appeal to authority, the red herring, the straw man, all these different things, the ad hominems. If you don't know them, which, by the way, again, the original battle is the spiritual battle. And, we're waging war against entities that are far more intelligent than we are. They have all of those first principles mastered, before day one of engaging on the part of a human, if you subscribe to that. But either way, what you realize is it's like they say knowledge is power. It's actually a false, it's not really a truism, because power comes from the will. Knowledge is just half of the battle. But if we can get those principles in order, then you'll be able to see when someone's trying to sell you sand in the desert or whatever it might be, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whose turn is it anyway?
I think it's yours, since I
okay. All right,
moved my rook over there.
Sounds good.
Knowledge is the power.
Yeah.
Virtue is all right. That's so important. We have free will to choose good or evil. Once we acknowledge that good and evil do exist, but in our relativistic society that is so blurred, as man tries to become God and says, I am the ultimate arbiter of truth, right? I'm going to decide what's good and noble for me. Not even noble, it's just the concept. Just I'm going to decide what I want to do in this kind of neo-narcissistic approach to life.
Ooh, neo-narcissistic.
That one came out of some orifice.
Wow. The neo-narcissist. That should be an episode one of these times, because narcissism is one of those terms it's thrown around a ton nowadays. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's because it's more prevalent than it's ever been, but at the same time I think it's more misunderstood.
It's overused and inaccurately applied, I think.
Oh, no question. Yeah. Big time. But choosing oneself as one's own God is certainly, probably by definition, very narcissistic.
Again, people aren't doing it consciously. I mean, we all might be prone to do that, to worship the person in our mirror.
As Aquinas says, we all will under the aspect of the good. And I think that's so important to recognize, and also, again, to build bridges with people instead of, coming in a condemning posture, because that's why people are, making the mistakes that are happening. Maybe it's objectively evil, but they're not consciously aware of that. And it's because, there's the subjective component as well as the objective component. And we all think we're doing good. Our will is designed to do good things, in other words. So even if we hijack it and we're doing something that's objectively maybe not good, or not the best thing that we should do in the moment, right? Prudence being what it is, doing the right thing at the right time. It's just something. It's something that needs to be honed, like anything else. It's like a skill in a certain sense, and it starts with parents. So, as we wrap up here, I'm wondering whether or not we're going to be able to conclude this battle on a high note for yours truly.
I'm going to move in my other rook over here.
You're going to want to. Yeah, you think you're going to want to, anyway. So, well, there we go.
Well, let's see here. Time is ticking, so we're just going to go here and end this, Mr. Kyle. Take you out of your misery. That's a check. I'm not sure if you can get out of that one, can you?
Well,
there we go.
Zachowicz.
It's been such a great pleasure, Kyle.
Yes. Thank you very much for...
I welcome a rematch, by the way, anytime.
Okay. All right. You're on.
All right.
And thank you, seriously, for sharing of yourself, Michael the man. Where your roots are, what your family has been through, the sacrifices that have been made for this country, coming over from Poland and making something of contributing to that American dream that everybody's seeking. And as we've identified throughout this conversation, these are tough times for just everyday people that are trying to make ends meet.
Sure.
And it takes courage to put your best foot forward to do the right thing for the community. So thank you for sharing your thoughts on this, and any parting words of wisdom.
Parting words of wisdom, just let's seek truth and try to live it. And there's with faith and reason, we can accomplish a lot. And I think people are inherently good by nature, of course, made an image and likeness of our Creator. We have to focus on what is good, beautiful, and true, and the rest will fall from that. And I'm very hopeful for society. And we all need each other's prayers. Faith and reason, two wings of the same bird leading to truth, will get us in the right place. So
Amen. And
yeah,
then
brother.
finally, just how can people support you who want to support you in the Cheektowaga region?
I see.
Like what day?
Yeah, well, November 7th is election day. Early voting starts a little bit before that, about a week before that. But yeah, come out and vote. It's really important to exercise that right that we have. There's people around the world are fighting and dying for the right to vote. Authoritarian systems. Here we have this privilege, and yet such a relatively small percentage of people do come out, especially on non-presidential years. So
Yes.
we have to get out there and vote, exercise that right, and hopefully elect the best officials that will best serve the community. And I hope to win your trust in the 7th Legislative District, and just try to bring common sense back to Erie County, and along with other candidates in their respective regions as well. So God bless all of you folks. Yeah, we need financial help. I mean, that's it. To print the literature, to get the word out. We can't possibly knock on all the doors that we'd like to, and so elections aren't that fun, but they're necessary. God bless you and your family, Kyle. It's been a real pleasure.
Yes, 100%. Michael Zachowicz, it's great to have you on. And if you enjoyed content like this, I exhort you to hit that like and that subscribe button. The subscribe is the way that we're going to get the algorithm to help us out in lieu of all of the other noise that perhaps doesn't think this way. So just get your family, your friends involved. If you agree with some of the ideas that we've laid out about truth, goodness, and beauty, I really appreciate it. God bless you.